The publication of my new book comes as a number of significant events have unfolded in recent weeks and months. There's been the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe, the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the State of Israel. There's been weeks of protests inside the Gaza Strip under the banner of the Great March of Return, which awfully culminated in a massacre on May 14th, although Israeli forces have been killing dozens of Palestinian demonstrators in the weeks leading up to that. And the US government, the Trump administration, has also relocated its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. These events are symptomatic of wider issues. They're manifestations of phenomenon and trajectories that I discuss in the new book. On the ground in Palestine today, between the river and the sea, in modern-day Israel and the occupied territories combined, there is one single regime, an Israeli state-controlled regime. It's effectively a de facto apartheid single state. And Israel controls that territory, controls that area, has colonized the occupied territories since 1967 through to today. And the Palestinians who live under direct Israeli rule, from the military brutality experienced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, through to the legislative discrimination experienced by Palestinians who've got Israeli citizenship in Haifa and Nazareth and elsewhere, they're all under that one same regime. And in the US, the Trump administration embodies this growing amount of support for Israel amongst the hard right, including amongst white nationalists. And the Trump era looks set to accelerate, as well as embodying, a pre-existing development that I discuss in the book, which is a polarization between Democrats and Republicans in the US, as well as this wider polarization in Europe and elsewhere over the issue of Israel. And at the grassroots, especially in the US, you find a big difference between what young, especially Democrats, think about Israel and what their own party leadership has by way of policy, but especially between Democrats and Republicans. And meanwhile, you also have growing divisions in the American Jewish community, numerous examples of this in recent times. For example, the Israeli forces' massacre of Palestinian demonstrators in the Gaza Strip was protested vigorously by a number of Jewish American groups, especially those dominated by the younger generation. The US embassy move to Jerusalem, big part of that has been the individual of David Friedman as well, the US ambassador appointed by Trump. Again, his appointment, as I discuss in my book, embodies these divisions and these trajectories, where Israel has become an increasingly divisive issue. And I describe these trajectories as so-called cracks in the wall. They're cracks in the pillars of Israel's traditional support. So while the situation on the ground is bleak and unfortunately gets bleaker, there are in parallel these developments internationally that give reason for hope, that don't bode well for Israel in the long term in terms of being able to maintain the status quo without a cost, including one of those developments, including the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. As we look forward, the demonstrations that we've seen in Gaza by refugees, by Palestinians whose families were ethnically cleansed by Israel during the Nakba, they remind us that at the heart of the question of Palestine is the issue of the refugees' return, and the way in which that return can be a process of transformation, so that this de facto apartheid single state can become a single democratic state.